Welcome to the first 21st Century China Public Lecture Series. Today we are very happy and honored to have Professor Zweig, who is a Professor Emeritus at the Division of Social Science, Hong Kong UST, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and Director of the Transnational China Consulting Unit.
Oh, old stuff, none of that anymore.
Oh, none of that anymore. Okay,
Yeah.
so
That's okay,
yeah,
but I am still a emeritus at HKUST.
Yeah.
And I teach still 2 courses at UST
Oh, okay.
online.
okay, yes. Professor Zweig has lived in Hong Kong since 1996 and was a full-time faculty member of the university for 25 years. So since 1990s, Professor Zweig has surveyed and interviewed academics, scientists, and entrepreneurs and employees who returned from studying abroad. And he continued this line of inquiry and research for over decades. And he just has a new book coming out, right? You want to show us a copy of your.
Sure, and I have flyers, discount, if you order, here's the book.
Okay, yeah.
And if you order using the flyer from Columbia University Press, the book's $16. So it's the series called Asia Shorts. So if you're looking to write a short book, 75,000 words, 150 pages, you want to get it out, they're interested.
Yeah, I see Susan left on it. It must be a very good book.
Susan, I use Susan. Susan said, definitive study, careful research, intellectual objectivity.
So today,
It's live, but it's
David is going to give us a talk on the same topic based on research in the book. So it's entitled "The War for Chinese Power in America."
right.
Okay.
And I will actually not talk. I'll talk a little longer than what you planned. I was told I only heard that I should talk for 25 minutes, but I may talk for 45 minutes. Okay?
Sure.
Is that okay, boss?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, while this is happening, so what happened with the book, so as Professor Zweig said, I've been a great book. So I've been working on Highway, the returnees for many years. And I had a book, I have a manuscript, I haven't published it yet. I will publish lots of stuff on this topic, but I haven't had a manuscript, about the case studies that were mentioned. And then I wrote a chapter about people who didn't go back, who were involved in what would be called the diaspora option. I'll mention that briefly. And as I wrote that chapter, all of a sudden the China initiative happened in America. So I had a big long book and I looked at the book and I said, you know, the last 2 chapters could be a small book. So I took the last 2 chapters and that's on the China initiative, the diaspora option, and then on the China initiative, right? So that's what happened. Now the world suffers from brain drains. Everybody but the United States previously suffers from brain drains. Everybody, the US is the one country that more than anybody else has benefited, been a winner on the brain drain. And it's been a problem for lots of countries, including my own. I am a Canadian brain drain, right? I lived in the United States, went to school in the US, lived in Hong Kong, but I was trained in Canada initially, my undergraduate. And so if you look at this table, this will work, yes. So you can see, I mean, here back in 2001, the brain drain was absolutely disastrous for China. 98% of the people getting a PhD in 2001, 98% stayed in the United States 5 years after graduating. Now, situations improved dramatically. India also, and here's Canada, 55% as of 2011. Europe, surprisingly, also. America benefits enormously from this. And the Center for Strategic and Emerging Technologies, known as Sept at Georgetown University, says that approximately 90% of Chinese research related to AI were remaining in the United States. So the world, particularly European scholars, looked at this brain drain and particularly looked at it on behalf of the developing countries and said, what can be done to help the developing countries? And their solution was the diaspora option. If you can't get a reverse brain drain, you can't get people to come back, at least those who stay abroad can help the motherland. And their first research was on Colombia, the country of Colombia. It was a network that they had. And so a good definition of the diaspora option is sort of diaspora-centered development, the key points being a series of policy initiatives and for foreign constituencies who share a special affinity. That's very important because a lot of the explanation for why mainland professors living or China-born professors living in the United States help China is because they share this affinity, right? Now, this group that has stayed in the United States is a remarkable group. The National Science Foundation estimates that there are about 100,000 Chinese professors or Chinese people in the United States with a PhD, right? Either they got it from the US, they got it from Europe, they may have gotten it in China and come here and stayed on a postdoc, but we're talking about 100,000 people. And if you look down any list, just go online, Google material science, and 4 of the top 5, maybe 5 of the top 10, right, will be mainland-born scholars. So again, remarkable group. And the problem from the perspective, though, of the diaspora option is the advocates of the diaspora option never thought about the fact that how are the countries who are home to this diaspora, how do those countries feel? In other words, how does the US feel when this diaspora of mainland Chinese living in the United States gets actively involved in helping their motherland, right? This becomes an issue, and that's what the China Initiative, in my own view, was all about. So China's looked to the new diaspora, right? The first they began with the Byron Jihua out of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Now the key word here is part-time. So this is all about people who get there, who are staying in the diaspora, but helping their homeland. It's not about people who go home. The rest of the book was about people who go home, and it's fine from my perspective, is if you come here, you study, you get a PhD, you work for 20 years, you become a talent, you decide to go home to China, then we would say, good luck to you, right? It's an open market, the world's open. The question becomes, what happens when the people stay in America, get American research money, use American tax dollars, and then develop technologies and then transfer those technologies back to China? That's where this whole sort of the key dilemma arises. And I'll sort of tell you I just told you my view about it. So China's been pretty active in this, right? The group of German students, Chinese scholars in Germany, started what became known as the Chunhui Jihua, right? Helping China. Jiang Zemin, right? Jiang Zemin at the 15th Party Congress calls on people to return even for short term and raises this concept, which is very important, which is 唯我服务, 不一定要回国服务。You don't have to 回国服务, but you need to 回国服务. That's the whole strategy, right? And in 2001, Jiang Zemin had this document which called for people not to return, but to help. And these are the different ways that they can help. The document outlined this. So they can use their professional association, which I'll talk about. Joint positions, right? 客家教授, right? Very common. Collaborative research, which is the heart of US-China collaborative research, right? Set up enterprises back in China, which is popular for entrepreneurs. Those are sort of the key strategies, right? And unfortunately, this is covered over the point, but many, let's get that out of there. Right, okay. Many Chinese born in, living, many PRCs, born PRC citizens, people born in China, responded to this request. So this is 2001, and we can see how they respond, but so do does the Chinese bureaucracy, the state administrations, various organizations in the Chinese government also pick this up. So, for example, the home program, right, run by CAST, the Chinese Association for Science and Technology, with the Ren Shibu, and with the Zhibu, the organization department, they organize a program. Under that program, it's collaboration between Chinese abroad and with China, and 56,000 startup projects, of which 21.4 relocate to China. So there's a serious transfer going on here. The Fedesiak and Weinstein, who work for Sept, they did a study, it's available on their website, 208 professional organizations, associations in 21 countries. Here's the breakdown of their data. 61% advertised involvement in tech transfers. They 49% advertised exchanging technical information with China, but they did it in Chinese websites. They didn't tell the West, by and large, that they were doing this. So there is this degree of Tongmingdu, not so much transparency, be the argument of the people at Sept, right? A problematic program is the 111 program, launched by Sept, which has moved under the Ministry of Science. And its goal was to establish 100 innovation bases at China's top universities, gather 1,000 overseas Chinese scholars from the top 100 universities overseas, and then get those people to come to China for 1 to 3 months. And they wound up with 143 innovation bases, 72 universities in China. Each base got about $270,000 a year for 5 years. So China put in a significant amount of money in this. Now, where this becomes a problem, Molly and I were talking about this before, where this becomes a problem is the US hawks look at this group and they say, oh, what are the universities that are benefiting? Well, Beihang, right, which is one of the 7 sons, and Harbin Gongchang Daxue, right, in Harbin. These are 2 of the universities that are seen to be closely affiliated with the PLA. And their students are now banned from coming to the United States. They've lost their rights to a visa, right? When I say the hawks, this book by Hannes and Dee Tatlao, Quest for Foreign Technology, China's Quest for Foreign Technology, this is where you can find the hawkish view on China, right? But I borrow from them because I try to be balanced, and I think they're onto something, right? The most infamous of all these programs was the 1,000 Talents Plan. Now, my own view is that the 1,000 Talents Plan was pretty cool. I mean, the goal was Li Yuanchao, who I I gave him a Bao once about why the Shenren Jihua was failing, why he couldn't get the best to come back. I actually told him, I'll do a segue. I told him that the reason that people weren't coming back was because the Guanyu and the Tren Li Tai Da, that bureaucrats were too powerful. And when I gave this Bao Gao, the president of Dalian Ligong Daxue was sitting there at the meeting, and Li Yanchao turns to him and says, "这个外国人说你的权力太大，你同意不同意?" Right? This foreigner says that you have too much power. Do you agree or not agree? And they got into a real pissing contest. And he lost his job 6 months later because he publicly opposed the Shenren Jihua. So I think there was a setup going on for me to speak and him to nail this guy. But what the hell, right? This is sort of being on the inside. He opposed it because couple reasons. One was he felt that it wasn't fair, that the returnees got so much more than those who hadn't gone overseas, and that it created instability within the university. My hypothesis was that he opposed it because the people who came back from overseas were smarter than him. And we did a test on this hypothesis where we collected data on the top 36 universities over 12 years and looked at whether the president had a foreign PhD or not, and whether or not they brought in talent, people on talent programs. And there was a very high correlation between, if you were a visiting scholar from overseas, you didn't want to bring these guys back because they undermined your authority within the university, they were smarter than you, all of this, right? So the hypothesis works. Anyway, so Li Yanchao thought that if he mobilized the Communist Party, that he could get people to come back full time. Well, sorry guys, but they wouldn't, right? And we found online 501 academic participants in 2011, and only 26.5% returned full time, 73.5% joined the part-time program, which meant that they stayed overseas. This is where the problem emerged. Now, this is the table that I showed at a university in China. I will not tell you what university it was, though someone sitting in the room was at that talk, right? And this, when my Chinese colleagues saw this, they said, 我现在明白为什么美国那么生气. Right? Why did the Americans get pissed off? They got pissed off because this is a really comprehensive program, right? Some of them are short-term, some of them are full-time. As I said, full-time's okay. You have the right to do that. But this was a part-time, the Tianren was part-time, Chunhui was part-time, the Changzheng Shreja, which doesn't get very much publicity, right? Which is a really big program. It also is part-time, but here you can see the numbers are huge, right? And here's the 1,000 Talents plan, right? And we were able to eventually figure out about 8,000 people came back on the 1,000, were involved in the 1,000 Talents plan, and where's and the U.S. intelligence estimates that there were close to 3,000 China-born scholars in the United States who joined the 1,000 Talents plan. And they become the target, by and large, of the China initiative, these 3,000 people. Now, to try and figure out how engaged were these talented people with China, we also collected data from 18 US universities and 4 UK universities. We eventually came up with 121 mainland scholars. And as you can see, 35% were Ke Jiao Jiao shows, but I was a Ke Jiao Jiao show. So lots of people get to be, adjunct professors. But for me, the big number is 6% were running laboratories in China. And that only from their CVs, they could have been running laboratories in China and didn't put it on their CVs. So this is people who were probably running a lab in the US, bringing that technology back to a laboratory in China. Now, why join a program? I'm sort of, as I said, I'm understanding, right? You can find that I think by and large, people did it because they wanted to help their country. Some of them did it because they could get a laboratory. You know, their Ming Chi would become bigger. They could get research assistants in China. I remember interviewing a young fellow in Beihang University who came back from Europe. I said, "Why did you come back?" He said, "In Europe, I could get 3 research assistants. I'm back now. I have 20 research assistants." So huge difference. These people could really build up their career. You can read some of the reasons here, just so that I can keep moving. A very good study by Jin Rousseau, Pete Suttmeyer, who many of you know, and Song Cao, who some of you know, said that there's a social basis binding overseas Chinese to a China with which they share many characteristics. Diaspora people help their countries all the time, right? I give money to Israel, though it could get me in trouble these days, right? But everybody does it. The Turks help Turkey, right? Countries do that, helping their people, right? Now, it's also worth remembering, did I skip a slide? No, good. It's also worth remembering that the United States and China agreed back in 2010 to defeat cancer. And I get very energized or enervated or annoyed about the whole question of cancer, because that's something that the world suffers. The United States and China are the two most, they suffer more from cancer, more cancer deaths than any 2 countries in the world. China number 1, US number 2. Good idea to collaborate to solve cancer. And so that was a really good thing. And the agreements were renewed in 2015. So by 2018, these guys are in trouble for being involved in cancer research, which I'll get to. Now, my own view is that Xi Jinping created MAFA for the students overseas, created a problem. And in 2015, at a meeting of the Tongjianbu, a meeting of the United Front Work Department, he called the Chinese overseas, the Haiwai Xuezhe, a Jiaoyan of Tongjiangongzhou, a focal point of United Front work. If I'm sitting in the FBI and I know that Xi Jinping has declared these people as a target of United Front work, I'm going to put my guard up. I'm going to assume that people from the United Front Work Department are running all over the world trying to get these people to help. And we know that they're doing it in France. And we've also been told that the United Front Work Department took over the positions of the Chaoban in the embassies. So if you meet someone from the Chaoban, sorry guys, if you meet someone from the Chaoban in the consulate from San Francisco, he may be actually United Front Work Department, right? So to that extent, the United States had reason to be concerned, and Xi Jinping put these people at risk by this kind of statement. And it's interesting, he says this in 2015, the FBI starts going after the 1,000 Talents program in 2015. I don't know that there's a direct link, but maybe they know. So America strikes back. That's the first half of the book, right? There you have the first half of the book. China, as I would say, over the top, trying to get the tech and putting some of these people at risk. But then along comes America. And the first person who feels the bite of this is Dr. Xi Xiaoxing of Temple View. He is charged with sharing secrets with China. His home the door is kicked in his home, FBI guns drawn. He turns to his wife and says, "Do whatever they tell you to do so they don't shoot me," right? He had been discovered, and this is very important, he had been discovered through Section 702. What is Section 702? 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act What that means is that the National Security Administration, the NSA, reads 1.8 billion emails a month coming in and out of the United States and passing through the United States. 1.8 billion, they put in keywords, anything that pops up, tech transfer, security, anything like that. They can focus on it. They can investigate the American citizen, the Chinese scholar in the United States. They can investigate him without a court order. They do not have to prove anything except they have to say, we think that there's something going on here. And that's what happened to Sept. They misread the technology. It was nothing. It was a hand warmer, right? But his career, he was fired for 4 months later. They dropped all charges. He is still furious about this. I had lunch with him 2 weeks ago in New York. He's still furious about this. Then in 2015, the FBI, as I said, goes after the 1,000 Talents plan. The Trump administration heightens the role of economic security, makes it national security. That actually can go back to the Clinton administration, where it first is raised. But then in January 2018, the Department of Defense declares China a strategic competitor, which, quote, seeks Indo-Pacific regional hegemony in the near term and displacement of the United States to achieve global preeminence in the future. Declaration, tough, right? So we get the China initiative. Director Wray goes to the Congress, goes to the Senate, and uses a term that Xi Xiaoqing likes to raise that really bothers him, non-traditional collectors. What does that mean? It means that everybody's a spy. Everybody's a potential spy. All of them, right? Scientists, professors, students, almost every field, they're exploiting open research and development environment, and that they're potentially sharing technology with China. In 2018, the FBI, I've seen one source on this, gave the National Institute of Health, the External Affairs Office, the name of 3,000 Chinese scientists of interest in the United States. So those would be probably mostly the 1,000 Talents people that they know of. In March 2018, the US Trade Representative Office criticizes China for unfair trade. In 2018, the National Intelligence Council says that there are 2,700, 2,600 TPP, 1,000 Talents people in the US. But interestingly, 44% of them are in medicine, life, or health sciences. But those guys will become a key target because they get NIH money, and the NIH declares war on the China scholars in the United States. So you get the China initiative. Interesting, the key goals of the China initiative is identifying priority trade secret theft cases, ensuring that investigations are adequately resourced, bring them to fruition in a timely manner, which doesn't happen according to the facts and applicable law. To a certain extent, yes. To a certain extent, no, because the FBI lies on some of these cases. Emphasize the need to deal with non-traditional collectors, right, who are being co-opted. And this is one of the more troubling parts. Administrators at US universities are to be educated in the art of detecting and reporting on their faculty. That's called McCarthyism, right? That's what went on. So to the extent that universities, actually administrators, agreed to do this, you've got faculty members all around the United States of Chinese ethnicity who have to look over their shoulder all the time. Now, it's interesting that the FBI found no cases of intellectual property theft, right? So here's what I say. Basically, it's a new version. I'm sympathetic to my Chinese friends that this is McCarthyism. Enemies from the outside, working on the inside, universities not protecting their faculty, guilt by association, all these kinds of things. I also say it sounds like a Maoist political campaign, a Yundong, right, from the 1950s. Top-down external threats, quotas for arresting people, right, within units. Within the FBI, we know that Demers, who was the associate, Deputy AG, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, told all the field offices, 57 field offices in the United States, I want 1 or 2 people arrested. Right? And so the guy who fingered Huan Ming in court says, well, I really didn't have any data on it. I couldn't prove it. But Huan Ming gets fired because this guy goes to the University of Kentucky and says Huan Ming is spying for the PLA. So the case is thrown out the window. I love this. Here's sort of Welling, who was the head of the office, who was the district attorney general in Massachusetts, says maybe next time an academic at an institution thinks twice or thinks a little bit harder about their collaboration with the Chinese institution and what the motivations of the Chinese institution might be. This is what in Maoist language would be Shaji Jingho, right? Kill the chickens, scare the monkeys, right? So very much fit. And then there's a fellow named Mike German who actually lives in San Diego, who was an ex-FBI agent, wrote a book about the FBI, very much criticizing the FBI. And he says, which I take to be, I agree with him, says that the FBI may not have cared if they could really convict people. They just wanted to disrupt the cycle of tech transfer back to China. And they are successful, largely successful in that. I'll skip this. There are some government agencies doing this. The NIH becomes very active in this. And for them, it's a real problem because for the scholars, it's a problem because they're the major funder of cancer research in the United States. And here they are going around. The head of the Office of External Research at NIH says that he wants to clean the NIH ecosystem of 1,000 Collins participants. Sounds kind of nasty. And I can tell you, the head of this extramural research office at NIH is the most despised person in the United States by China scholars in the United States. They want him fired, and the NIH decided not to fire him. So what happens, he does things like he gets on the phone with the University of North Carolina, and he tells them that if you don't fire this guy, who's been at the university for 27 years, you're gonna lose $1 billion in NIH money. That's why I pressed you, Susan, on to what extent the guy, Professor Fu, how bad was what Professor Fu did here, I don't know, right? But he was targeted, I'm sure, by NIH, right? And this happens nationwide. How many people did they bust? And here's the name of the guy who runs the office. He's very proud of the fact that he got 103 people to be fired. And a troubling thing is compliance review remains open as of December 2022. 58% of the cases are still not resolved. So 58% of the people investigated are sitting there with the sword over their head and they don't know what's going to happen, whether or not they'll lose their jobs. 2 cases. Am I doing okay time-wise? Mm-hmm. Moving it along? Okay, 2 cases. One of the cases, I was an expert witness for both of these cases. I was hired by lawyers, basically to represent their interests and to look at their cases, so I have in-depth analysis, and I've got some other information in the book. I've got a 3rd case of a non-Chinese who got deal to the Department of Defense money and made the mistake of going to China and giving a talk at Tsinghua and was shut down for a year when he came back from overseas. Lost all access to his laboratory. So this kind of thing happens. You don't just have to be Chinese during the China initiative. But this guy, Dr. Huang, he's purged along with 2 other NYU China-born professors who had NIH money. Now, how does he join the program? In 2011, when America was saying 1,000 Talents plan is okay, he gets recruited to help out a friend who was working at the Wenzhou Medical University. Now, a lot of Chinese knew that if they could get an overseas Chinese to join the program, the Zhu, the organization department, would give them money. So their goal is to get the money. Their goal isn't necessarily to do more research, but their goal in part is to get the money. So he agrees, and he says that was his huge mistake. He agrees, they put his name on some, they announced that he received the award, that he joined the university, which wasn't true, that he was doing collaborative research on their campus, which he says was not true. He denies all of it. But his name is on the articles, because it has to be on the articles, because that's how they got the money. Now, this is the guy who had raised $150 million for NYU in oncology research. What he did take was 5 universities who shared the money that the Zhu gave to the Wenzhou Medical University. They all send him researchers, maybe postdocs, maybe research assistants, to come to his lab for free. Now, NYU knows these people are coming because they're Jiang, right? They have to approve the visas. So it's not like they don't know that these people are coming, but under pressure from NIH, they have a secret panel. They don't call me to defend or explain why Dr. Huang might have done this. And he's fired. Goes back to China, career over. Right? I spoke to him after he went back. Right? That's it. The end of his research. A second guy is in some ways even more sad. Simon Ng is recruited by a colleague that he knows in China who tried to get a 1,000 Talents award, failed. So he says to Dr. Ng, can I use your name? Dr. Ng says, okay. And then he writes in his proposal to the the organization department, that this Dr. Ng is the best thing since sliced bread, as we say, is amazing. And he could do this and this and this and this, none of which he could do. The things that he said were things that he himself could do. So he attributes all these great talents to Dr. Ng. Dr. Ng, in fact, is a specialist on light, LED, and that's it. And because he's a specialist on LED, he has patents in China. His brother has a company in Singapore, they manufacture in China, he has patents. Now he's interviewed by the FBI. Foolishly, he doesn't tell the FBI that he has these patents in China. They ask him, do you have patents in China? He says no. He had 59 charges against him, 58 of them are dropped. The one that they get him for is lying to the FBI. It's a federal offense. Loses his job, goes to jail. 8 months in a minimum security prison, comes out, it's over. His career is done, right? Sorry, guys. Now, there definitely are problems with the China initiative. The disclosures, the requirements, what you needed to do when you were writing an NIH or an NSF or a DoD application, how much information you had to give was not clear. Universities were not checking these applications very well. And in fact, of interest is the NIH tightens its own disclosure requirements in March, just at the time that they start to go after these guys. So they, as we say in football, they move the goalposts. All of a sudden, these people are guilty for something that, when they did it, was not to be found guilty. So here's a former NIH director basically saying, look, we encourage this kind of stuff before now they're guilty. That's terrible. Carol Lamb, who I interviewed, a former district attorney, says that the problem with the China initiative is people were under pressure to find people. Right, the DOJ eventually had to give up the China initiative because it was arresting people and the judges were throwing the case out. So they had to give it up. The impact of all this, right? So one of the big impacts is Chinese students stop coming, or the numbers decrease. And the numbers of Indians pick up. So here you can see the flow, right? Here's COVID, but after COVID, the Chinese continue not to come. After COVID, the Indians come. And overall, after COVID, the foreign students pick up. So clearly the Chinese have stopped, have slowed down, right? Here they're down to 290,000. Still a lot of students, but the numbers are down. A professor named Xie, but many of you know him as Xie, who teaches at Princeton. He and his team did an article in PNAS, and they show that in these fields, the number of Chinese scholars are moving back to the United States. These people are going back, and they do this by looking at the shifting of the academic affiliation to China between 2010 and 2021. These people have changed their academic affiliation. The last time they published an article, they were at UC San Diego. The next time they published an article, they were at Westlake University in Hangzhou. That's Professor Fu would be an example of that here. The OECD did a study, and it found that the net flow of scientific authors has moved away from America. And that more from the OECD is picking up and China's picking up, and America's in decline. And Molly Roberts, who's here, has done other studies which show this. I didn't have a chance, but I have something else and I have time. But she's been doing terrific stuff with Professor Rustra. Is she here also? She said she might not make it. She may be watching on Zoom. She's suffering from jet lag. Anyway, they're a terrific team, and one of the reasons that I wanted to come here, and I had great conversations with them. Conclusion. A very smart lady named Susan Shirk called this the tragedy of research commons. Right, this is what's known as Pai Ma Pi. She invited me to come this time. Pai Ma Pi, right? Never accused me of not Pai Ma Pi, right? So it really is a problem. And here's where scientific research becomes a form of the security dilemma, where states start to feel threatened by the increased scientific capacity of their adversary. And this is particularly problematic when there are no rules of the road, which I was talking to Professor Shirk over lunch and saying we need to get some kind of better rules about what should and shouldn't be done in terms of controlling these flows, because the Chinese scholars in America need that kind of protection. So tech transfers, all of this becomes national security implications as China becomes the US strategic competitor. No doubt, and here I may get in trouble, China was over the top. Put these people at risk. You can't use publicly call for the United Front strategy to be used to get this technology back without putting Chinese scholars in the United States at risk. Some of them were naive that they thought they could get away with it. Some of them were just stupid to think that they could hold two positions in China and they weren't going to get caught, or get grants from NIH and grant from the Chinese Natural Science Foundation and not report it and think that maybe they won't get caught. And then on their publications, they even would put only their Chinese university and only the NSFC money, which is how the NIH caught them. So that's why I say maybe stupid. But the US government turned this into a human rights violations, fear mongering, racism, the seat, all kinds of stuff. It targeted, in the book, I have three kinds of Chinese scholars: the guilty, the not so guilty, and the innocent. And those of you who know Clint Eastwood movies know that this could be the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Da, 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 da. Right, so these people, they were relatively innocent professors, some of these people who really followed the lead of the government. Let's do cancer research. My friend, Dr. Huang at NIH, let's do cancer research. I'll do cancer research. I'll do it with, however I can get some good help. And now you're gonna kick me out of the university without due process. And the NIH is much worse than the DOJ, because at least the Department of Justice posted on its website who they were investigating and who they arrested, or at least who they arrested. And journalists in the United States, worldwide, could go to their defense. But the NIH, secret, what I call the silent purge, right? And my big concern, I understand the security threat. If it's dual use technology or potential military, security potential, military potential, the United States has the right to defend its national interests. But when it's cancer research, give me a break. When it's biotech, right, maybe there's a loss because some Chinese scholar may take that biotech research back to China and set up a company. But you're still talking commercial loss. You're not talking about a huge national security issue. And so the Augustine Commission talked about high walls around small fields. That's what the US needs to do. To conclude, finally, ironically, the US government has won in the short term. Many Chinese, as Dr. Roberts' research shows, Chinese are doing less research with their colleagues across the Pacific. Molly, I checked, and the continuing collaboration is here in the United States. So the Chinese who get NIH money are still more people are still asking for NIH money. More Chinese professors in the US are still asking for NIH money, and they're still doing research with colleagues in the United States. But as Professor Roberts showed, the cross-Pacific stuff is slowing down. And that's a loss for America, and it's a loss for us, particularly given the fact that the US-China collaboration has been such a core part of international collaboration in science and tech. You want to protect yourself, protect yourself. But cancer research, give me a break, right? And so we all lose as the United States creates this, what I would call a very toxic environment for Chinese-born scholars and researchers in the United States. Thank you.
We have about 10 minutes.
That's it?
Yeah.
It was an hour.
But maybe we can stretch it a little bit. Before we open up the floor for questions, may I abuse my privilege as the moderator to ask you one question?
Do you want me to still stand in front, or can you zoom? That's fine. That's fine. Okay, I'll sit down now.
Yeah.
I'm older than I was.
And my question is a little bit self-serving. We have listened to many of the stories about the over-the-top targeting of many ethnic Chinese professors, and some of the experience are really heartbreaking. But when you talk about talent, you are not talking about any kind of talent.
Make sure you talk louder.
Okay.
Professor Shirk's voice isn't loud.
Okay. When you talk about talent, you are not talking about any kind of talent, even in the academia. You are talking about technology transfer as well. So my question for you is, do you see any kind of like chilling effects for academics working in non-STEM areas? if I'm a sociologist, or if I'm a literature scholar, what would be the effects for those?
Right, well, according to Dr. Roberts, who looked at NSF applications, the NSF applications for research in China are down.
Well, this wasn't me, but yeah, I've seen this data, or research about China, that is an application.
I mean, yeah, the last time, I mean, I haven't tried to go back in to do research.
Yeah.
The last time I was able to do a survey was 2019 of entrepreneurs in China.
Right.
Will I be able to do it? I doubt it. The people who did the research with me probably would not take the risk of doing it now. Because I'm looking at the kind of technology that they're bringing back from overseas. I don't think they want that. I can tell you that, so I teach part-time in Taiwan also. So I'm on all sides, right? My feet go everywhere, wherever I can. And I had a meeting with people at the IIR, the Institute of International Research, at which university is it? Is it in the National Tsinghua, not National Tsinghua, in Taipei. And they now are setting up a program to do what they call studying China without China. How do we study China without doing China? One of my best examples of this is Andy Walder has a new paper that has nothing to do with domestic China.
Right.
First time I've ever seen Andy do something. It's about SOEs going global, right? And it's like, I see this and I say, Andy, what are you doing? Right, because he probably can't get domestic data,
Right.
though Scott Rozelle and Marty White did get data. So that's worth following up, but it's not easy. And Scott's got pretty good guanxi, right? He's able to get a lot of stuff. And if you look at their study, I think they somehow got the data in some kind of little bit of assistance. So it's very tough. And I think that China doesn't want us to do the research so much. And I'm not sure that after this presentation, I will be that welcome. We'll see. I hope so.
Thank you.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's a question.
Right.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
Hi, I have a question about the impact of all this on other countries. Is there spillover over the international cooperation in general between Americans and Israelis or Iranians or I mean,
Sure.
Iranians
Well,
and everything?
4 countries that they, am I cutting you off? You
Yeah.
want to finish?
No, I'm just curious.
Sure.
If
So
this is not just about China.
right, what the Department of Justice did was to create a new office. They stopped the China initiative and then created a new office of the bad countries. And the 4 bad countries are Iran, Russia, North Korea, and China. So they moved China into this category. I think it's benefited other countries. It's probably good for India. More scholars may be trying to work with India. So I don't think it doesn't have any other implications that I can think of other than that. But if other people know stuff, the collaborations, a lot of Chinese are moving to collaborate with OECD countries, with Europe. So the Europeans are benefiting in terms of collaborative research because of the US cutting back on this. So they're benefiting.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for sharing this information and your insights. My name is Xin, and I'm second year at GPS. Actually, I have 2 questions. The first one is just to clarify the definition of talent, because since we are at GPS, our major are Master of International Affairs, Master of Public Policy. So I guess after graduation, we do not belong to the group of talent because you only mentioned PhDs. Yeah, is that correct?
So I would say that the talent that the governments are worried about, that China wants and that the United States wants to block are the PhDs.
Okay.
Which is why at the beginning, when I show the brain drain, it's the brain drain of high talent. Now, I do have in the book a different table which calls talent some university education. So there's also data, I have data on that. And that shows that the Indians are really losing out. Their brain drain is much worse than China's. There's about a third more of people who don't go back, who stay home. But on the PhDs, it's about even. So that's one thing. And we used to talk about the Hai Pai. The Hai Pai used to be 6-month visiting scholar. When I started this long ago, it was the 1-year 6-month visiting scholar. Then it was the 1-year visiting scholar. Then eventually we started to say, hey, this is really about the PhDs. Because you really learn, so your human capital is much more intense, in my view, if you've had a foreign PhD experience. Right? I always think back to my days in Michigan, at the University of Michigan, and what did they do? They took my brain and they twisted it. And they made me look at the world in a way that was different than when I walked into their program. Right, empirical research, defining my variables, right, all this kind of stuff. And that's really what happens to these scholars. They really look at the world differently. And that's why I think the visiting scholars are very different. Qima Kanghua, right, riding the horses, looking at the flowers. That's what most visiting scholars did. A 3-year postdoc is pretty good. I would say a 3-year postdoc should make you talented. But question number 1, number 2.
Yeah, the second question.
Let me just say that in my research, I do look at one group that in the book, the next time I come visit, the next book has a chapter on the masters, people like you, who come for a 2-year MA to paint a little gold. Right, and want to go back. And so the chapter is actually called Looking for a Job in China.
Yeah.
And the findings of that chapter, so I was mentioning to Professor Roberts, I have 6 deep answers that create a dependent variable of, are you satisfied or not satisfied with your overseas experience? Or are you happy with your life? Sorry, are you generally happy with your life now that you've come back to China? And the left side is, why did you come back? You had opportunities, you came back because of your family, or you failed overseas. Failed overseas are things like, I couldn't get into Western society, or I couldn't find a job. The best predictor of dissatisfaction coming back to China was that you came back for your family. So I gave a talk at Columbia, and I told all of the students who came to hear my talk, this was a couple of years ago, about 60 students at SEPA, jammed into a room, and I said, don't go back for your parents. And I said, you're gonna be miserable. The data confirm this, right? Right? Yeah. She had a second question then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm excited about that book. And before asking my second question, I have to mention a phenomenon that I just got last night. Because my roommate, I have a temporary roommate who's from Peking University, and she left today. And she mentioned yesterday, like in Peking University or Tsinghua University, right now, students are not encouraged to study abroad. Even though they got offer from Hong Kong University or university in the US, but like the staff working in offices will not give them like sponsor, financial support or visa support. So only she got the opportunity to come to the US, USD, but the rest of her roommates are just, lost the opportunity. So it just reminds me like,
Can I just say, this is what the Chinese would call picking up a stone and dropping it on your foot.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So it just let me think like, do you think the China or Chinese society or government become more conservative or overconfident? I don't know.
Well, I would say that they're more paranoid. I mean, this is a national security state that's worried about everything. That's worried about America infiltrating, brainwashing these students. I mean, don't you know you've been brainwashed? Right? So I think that I'm joking. I like to keep that's my style. Okay. I think that's a really important part. I think that Xi Jinping is trying to cut down the links, cut down the dependence, wants more homegrown scientists, people to stay. So I would say it's really sad that that's happening. But then again, Americans aren't going to China, right? Korea, I know the Korean ambassador to China. There are almost no Koreans in China. There used to be 75,000 Korean students in China. Maybe there's a couple hundred.
There's one more question.
Well, there's also Professor Roberts.
Okay,
Scientists.
Sure, please.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
okay, my name is Jiang Zemin, I'm a professor in the UCSD Medical School.
And we can talk, I'd love to keep in touch.
And I study cancer. So
You're my hero.
I really appreciate your insightful talks, all the issues, I think, I like it actually, and you really give very insightful comments. But I feel like in addition to all these issues involved, right, what's not touched is the problem in this country, in this society right now. Okay, to illustrate my point, let's not talk about my generation. As long as you hear me talking, well, you can see I have accent. I was not born here, right? But now my son, their generation, they are 100% American. They were born here, and I just want to give you one example. Let's say here, there's a professor. He had two sons, very successful, and they both of them went to the top university in this country. Okay, and his first son graduated from top university in this country, in this state, in California. Okay, graduated with like outstanding record. And then not only just like GPA, yeah, many people feel, wow, Chinese student have only good, taking the exam, got high GPA. No, he's not that case. He's very good in getting high GPA, and also he has been involved in doing research for all his undergraduate years. And he took a gap year, did research, and published first of the paper. And you know what, when he applied for medical school, he couldn't even get a single interview offer from all the UC system. And you know what, his father told me, like, we also go out for hiking, and we had one argument, debate. So I feel like there's a discrimination against Asian kids.
Absolutely.
And my son never agreed with me, had a big argument. So until that point, when his application was denied by all the UC system, he realized that there is a discrimination. And that has, like, that kind of discrimination, has nothing to do with the Chinese government. He was born here, he's 100% American, right? I don't think you can say anything about the communist or Chinese government. Well, of course, luckily he got admitted into medical school in another state. But I just want to give you that example. And of course, I have two kids. They're not in good college, fine. I feel like they're lucky. But I have seen so many of his friends or just like the top high school in San Diego area. You can see that they are so disappointed about their results in college applications. So I think we need to, when you consider all these issues, right, this issue I think also need to be included.
Well, I only use the word racism once. I did that because there's a study done by a Professor Kim in, what's the journal? He did a study of the economic intelligence cases where people were charged with economic crimes. And that happens before 2015. And the data show clear discrimination against Chinese in terms of if a Chinese and a non-Chinese commit the same crime, the Chinese is punished worse. That, you know, the FBI clearly believes, I didn't go into the FBI clearly believes what they call the theory of the 1,000 grains of sand, which is that and it sort of fits into the idea of non-traditional collectors, right? The FBI believes that Chinese by their very nature are spies. And the others, that whole concept, sociology of othering people. Chinese in this society get othered very readily. But I would, just in sort of defense of the system, maybe it's also that there's so many smart Asians applying to these schools, and the schools feel some pressure to balance that. I mean, there was a time when UC Berkeley was getting, 40% of the students were Asian. So maybe the schools felt some pressure to try and balance that. Nevertheless, I do believe that there is serious racism against Chinese and against, well, predominantly against Chinese in the society. No, I have no problem with that, and that your son suffers in part from that. And I'm sorry for it. You know, I
did my 4-year postdoc in Toronto, Canada.
Which, you know, U of T?
Yeah.
Yeah, great school, great school.
I'm told that we have to wrap things up. Maybe we can conclude the conversation after the talk. Thank you very much for coming.